Welcome to Age Potential TV. I'm Lori Campbell, your host, gerontologist, and advocate of your best life, here to introduce you to an emerging trend called age potential. Here's to living out your age potential. Would you like to look 10 years younger, 10 pounds thinner, and free yourself from those nagging aches and pains? Then you'll want to stay tuned because my guest, Janice Novak, a posture expert, has the answer. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Well, posture affects everything we do. Good posture, for the most part, really is an overlooked part of the wellness equation.
Right. Yep.
And it really is a key component to healthy aging.
Right. I think posture is so important because it affects how you look, how you feel, and how the world around you perceives you. So I think people have an awful lot to gain. I think it's interesting to note, too, that the #1 cause of back and neck pain is poor posture. You know, so if your head tends to hang too far forward or your shoulders are too rounded, your joints don't fit together the way that they're supposed to. And so some muscles have to work really hard while others just get weaker. So yes, it sets up a whole bunch of problems.
It does. So what is the most common posture spine misalignment problem?
I think in this day and age, by far, the most common one that I run into is, my daughter termed it vulture head, you know, where your head tends to hang forward from your shoulders. So for all those people who have ever caught their own reflection in a window or mirror to see that their, you know, head kind of leads the way, you know, it changes what goes on in your neck joints. It's the source of a lot of neck and upper back and shoulder discomfort.
And what are some of the things that lead into this type of posture?
I think why it's all happening is because everybody sits at computers or laptops. And so everybody sits, you know, with their head jutting forward and their rib cage collapsed.
Okay, and over time it just keeps
And over time, you know, your head weighs about 10 pounds. So when it sits directly over your shoulders, how it's supposed to, the muscles in your neck don't have to work very hard except to turn and nod your head. But now if your head hangs forward, even 1/4 of an inch, studies have shown, it changes the way that your neck joints fit together. And it makes the muscles in your neck, you know, that upper trapezius muscle, overwork all day long. And that's the problem with poor posture. Some muscles work too hard while others just get weaker and weaker.
Well, since you're hitting on those muscles, we know that bad posture usually comes from weak muscles.
Yes.
So which muscles and which exercises do you suggest for us to hone in to strengthen so we can better our posture?
Good. I think first of all, because so much of the problem comes from when you let your rib cage just kind of fall forward, like as people sitting at their computers. So there's a little adjustment that people can do. We all have a sternum, a breastbone, and what I like for people to do is when they realize they've been slumping, to just kind of lift their rib cage up a little bit to reposition your rib cage. The muscles that I find that by far get the weakest in this day and age are the muscles right across the mid-back, and also the muscles in the back of your shoulders too, which is why so many people have rounded shoulders.
Would that be the traps, or?
It'd be the rotator cuff in the back of your shoulders, and it would be the mid and lower trapezius in your back.
In the trap.
Yep.
Okay.
Because if you figure you're sitting like this, you know, at your computer, the muscles here are overworking, and the muscles across your mid-back are in a stretched position. They're getting weaker every second you sit like that. And so to strengthen and reverse all of that, it's really quite simple. I want people to become aware of what their rib cage is doing, and to, you know, whenever you realize this kind of thing is happening, just to shift your rib cage up. But then there's a really easy exercise that people can do and fit in 1,000,000 times a day that really will have an effect on their posture. And one is to just shift your rib cage up a bit, pull your shoulder blades back towards your spine, and then press them down slightly towards your waist. And you feel all those mid-back muscles kind of contract and tighten. Those are the ones that get too weak. So you're sitting at your desk and you're using your computer and your neck is hurting or your back. You just shift your rib cage up, pull your shoulder blades back, and press them down, and that reverses everything. Physiologists have found that just a couple seconds of a counteracting movement can undo a lot of damage that we do to our posture during the day. And for most people, you know, 1,000,000 times a day, we're always rounded forward. So the reverse of that is just shifting up, pulling your shoulder blades back and down. And that in and of itself is a really effective exercise.
Okay, well, good. And how about our core health? I know I read in some of your material that you talk about our abdominals, our core, having actually 4 layers, and the traditional crunches that we traditionally do are useless.
Yeah.
You said, well, what is good?
We have 4 layers of muscle, and the one that we really want to get strong, the only layer of abdominal muscle that actually spans all of your midsection is the very deepest layer. It's called the transverse abdominis. So, you know, the top layer, those 2 little strips, they're good, but they don't do that much for you. The second and third layer, 2 little patches, but that 4th layer spans all of your midsection, and that's the transverse abdominis. And when we talk about strengthening your core, that's the muscle we mean. And all those traditional crunches that people do at home, they'll get that top layer, they'll get a little bit of the second and third layer, doesn't even touch that deepest layer. So there's a really good, effective exercise that people can do, and again, they can fit it in their day 1,000,000 times. They don't have to change clothes, they don't have to haul themselves to a gym. Want to do it?
Sure.
Okay, so I have people lift their rib cage up.
Okay.
And now you're going to inhale through your nose and gently but steadily pull that oxygen all the way to the bottom of your rib cage so you feel everything inflate. And then when you exhale, I want you to exhale like you're pushing air through a straw. And as you do that, I want you to suck your belly button towards your back. And you feel that whole sheet of muscle contract?
I do.
And then I tell people to lock that muscle in place. Your brain should be able to tell it to stay contracted.
Okay.
But you still take little breaths.
Okay.
And you hold it for 10 seconds.
Okay.
And then let it relax. And if you did 2 or 3 of those in a row, you can get that transverse muscle really strong within a couple weeks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you suggest most people I've read before, maybe every hour get up for 2 or 3 minutes? I mean, does that have an important part
Sitting
of...
at a desk, sitting too much during the day causes a lot of back problems, a lot of weak muscles. So yeah, it's not a good thing to sit for hours. Studies have been done that show people don't live as long that sit, you know, who sit the longest.
Sedentary.
So to get up every night, you know, every 45 minutes or an hour, even if it's just to walk down the hall, or instead of calling somebody or emailing your coworker, you know, get up and walk there.
Good, good. Well, could you demonstrate proper spinal alignment for us?
Yes. Proper, you know your posture is in good alignment when, from a side view, your ear, your shoulder, your hip, your knee, and your ankle should be in a straight line. Those parts should line up vertically. But for most people, you know, their ear is a good 3 inches beyond. So there's a sitting alignment technique and a standing one. And there's a really nice little alignment technique that people can use to practice getting better posture. And as I said, one of the big problems is the rib cage slumps and the head droops forward. So what I like people to do is get a ribbon and 2 safety pins. And when they shift their rib cage up to where it should be, they pin that ribbon to their shirt, pull the ribbon really tight, pin it to the bottom of their shirt, and then for the next 5 or 10 minutes, if they see slack in their ribbon, then they know they're slumping, and they can immediately reposition themselves. And if you can do that for 5 or 10 minutes, just having your rib cage in a good position really strengthens the muscles that hold you upright, that support good posture.
I like that. I read in a study in one of my gerontological journals that seniors that have this kind of posture, they posed it as high trunk line of inclination. Seniors who have this are more likely to go into nursing homes, need in-home service help, and they're 3.5 times less likely to be able to feed themselves, bathe themselves, dress themselves. What is high trunk line of inclination?
It's basically poor posture, and if you notice, you know, senior citizens walking, a lot of them their upper body tends to lean forward, so they're always kind of beyond their center of gravity. A lot of times we call it kyphosis, you know, too much curve in their upper back and leaning too far forward. So I think it's important to note that no matter how old a person is, no matter how poor their posture is, it's never too late, and there's always things they can do to improve it. And I think it all starts, and especially for senior citizens, with this rib cage thing. Because, you know, traditionally as we tend to get older, everybody, you know, it seems we tend to round forward. And if you've ever been to the doctor to get your height measured and they tell you, you know, you're an inch shorter than you were last time you were here, a lot of people think that they lost disc space, and you lose a little tiny amount of disc space. What takes your height down is when your spinal curves become more exaggerated. So your posture becomes worse, and that's what brings your height down. And now think of it, when your rib cage droops forward like this, you're pressing on all of your internal organs. They don't have the room they need, they're not able to work the way that they're supposed to, and it can start a vicious cycle. So if people can just become aware, you know, because it's a lot to think of at one time, but if you can just become aware of shifting your rib cage up whenever you think of it. This little movement of repositioning your rib cage can actually take an inch or two off your midsection. Again, when you slump forward, your insides have nowhere to go, so they come down and out, and you immediately make your midsection a couple inches wider than it really is. So whenever you take that pressure off and just shift your rib cage to where it needs to be, you take an inch or two off your midsection.
Right, right. And so many of us, especially women, are not really lifting weights or small.
Right.
You know, does that really have a play in all this?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I think women
we do cardiovascular.
Everybody does.
But
women in particular, we need to focus on strengthening exercise. You know, cardiovascular is wonderful, stretching is wonderful. What we need to do is strengthen our muscles. So if for no other reason, you don't become a frail little old person. You know, I think it's really interesting to note that lots of studies show the human body does not have to fall apart the way that it typically has. That it can last us a good 100 years. But what we need to do to get it to last is we need to feed ourselves good food with nutrients that allow your body to do what it needs to do, and you got to keep your muscles strong. So whether you do push-ups against your kitchen sink or you use things, you know, little things like resistance bands as you sit there watching television at night, there's a lot you can do to keep your muscles strong. And in my humble opinion, that's what I think we need to do.
Wonderful. You wrote a book. It's called Posture, Get It Straight.
Yes.
What is the #1 takeaway from your book?
I think the #1 takeaway from the book is posture is important. It affects how you look, it affects how you feel, and it affects how people view you. You know, so improving posture, you have an awful lot to gain.
And where can they get it?
And it's not that difficult, too, by the way. You can get it from Amazon.com. You can get it from my website, improveyourposture.com.
Wonderful.
In various bookstores.
Wonderful. Great information.
Thank you
for being here, Janice.
Thanks for having me.
Good posture is a fundamental component to living out your age potential. Be mindful of your posture.